Here we'll be looking at the perfectly competitive model for market supply and demand, as well as for the representative firm. So whenever we draw the graph for this market structure for the perfectly competitive market, you'll have two graphs actually. So you're going to have the market side of the model, which you can see pictured here. And then you'll also have the firm side of the model that's pictured here. Okay, so we'll walk through each of these. So starting with the market, it's going to look like the supply and demand graph that you're used to. Right? The supply and demand graph that you learn in principles is derived from the perfectly competitive market model, right? The same assumptions apply whenever we use that basic supply and demand model. So when we're thinking about market demand, one thing that students sometimes forget is that this is an aggregate curve. So this is the sum of all consumers in that market. Right? Similarly, when we talk about supply in the market, it's an aggregate. So it's talking about the sum of all producers in this model. So how much are they willing to provide? What's their quantity supplied in response to the prevailing set of prices that could occur? And then same thing on the demand side, it's showing the quantity demanded in the aggregate summed across all consumers in response to the set of prices that could occur, okay? To get the market supply curve, since 303 focuses on the supply side of the market, that's what we're going to focus on here. To get market supply, you actually did this exercise in the practice problem for chapter 7, as well as in the assignment, if you've done that already, where you actually start from each individual firm's marginal cost curve and set it equal to the price. And you're going to aggregate up. Whoops, I drew that the wrong way. We're going to aggregate that up for all of our firms, and that's going to produce for us the market supply curve. Okay, it's going to show us how much is being provided on the market, that quantity supplied in aggregate, the sum of everything provided at the foregoing price. Remember, one of our main implications of this model is that firms are price takers. So we're going to represent that graphically by using a horizontal demand curve for the firm set equal to the price of the market price of the good, right? In this case, we're talking about eggs. So note with this perfectly elastic curve, what it's telling us is consumers will buy any amount of eggs, in this case, in dozens at that $2.25 price. If the firm were to try to price above that, they would sell zero. If they try to price below that, they're also not going to sell anything. All right. This is the price at which consumers will purchase eggs. And so because those firms are price takers and we have these implications, that firm demand curve is going to be perfectly elastic, and it's going to exactly equal the firm's marginal revenue, right? That marginal revenue is how much they get from selling each additional good, and that's just going to equal the price. As they sell a dozen eggs at $2.25, that's the revenue they've received from that sale of that single dozen of eggs. The firm's supply curve is going to be their marginal cost curve, but a specific portion of it. So it's only going to be that portion of the marginal cost curve above the average, the minimum point of the average variable cost curve. Okay, equal to and below average, or sorry, not equal to, below average variable cost, the firm is going to shut down, right? Remember the firm shutdown decision. They're comparing operating revenue and operating costs. And the operating cost for the firm is their variable costs. And so if their revenue, the price, exceeds average variable cost, they're going to shut down. And so they're not going to be producing anything. Quantity supplied is zero at that price and below. Okay. So that's why we only use a portion of the firm's marginal cost curve. All right, putting it all together, we get the representative firm graph for our perfectly competitive model. Right, so I can write that here for you, representative firm. And the reason we call it that is because we assume that all of our firms in a perfectly competitive market are identical. So we can represent them all with a single one. All right. So that's why we call it representative firm, because it's the single firm that's standing in for the rest. Another thing we want to note about the perfect elasticity of the firm's demand curve is it's showing us that consumers have an infinite number of substitutes available for that farmer's eggs. Right? If they don't purchase their eggs from that particular farmer, they can buy the same exact eggs at this same price from someone else. And so that's why they're not willing to pay any more for that good. Okay? And then, like we said before, the firm supply curve is just their marginal cost curve. With that, we'll stop here, and in the next video, we'll go through profit maximization.